Hi, welcome to Perfectly Frank. It is the first episode of my new podcast. Hopefully, it lasts. And today I have a special guest with us, somebody who I think really encapsulates some unique viewpoints, a person who I really admire online. They really create some amazing content. And I think it's better if we just let them introduce themselves. Chris Paul Rainbows.
Hi, Frank. You are perfectly frank, let me tell you.
Oh, well, I wonder who could have possibly helped me come up with that name.
I'm so honored to be your guest today on your new show. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, and I'm really thankful that you were willing to come on and help me out with this because this is nerve wracking. I'm doing like a lot of new stuff all at once, and so it's really about building up the confidence. And I was like, okay, Chris is like super into everything and like so energetic all the time and so happy. So that even if it sucks, I'm gonna have somebody who's smiling and laughing the whole time, and that'll make me feel better.
That's smart planning. I like that.
So for anybody who might not be aware with who you are, could you give like a brief introduction to who is Chris Paul Rainbows?
Oh my gosh, that's so like what who? Like it's like why are we
La ti
here? What
da.
is the universe all about? Yes, my name is Chris Paul Rainbows. What do? I do a couple things. I own a branding agency that specializes in working with not-for-profits and people doing good things. I've been doing branding and Mad Men. I wouldn't call it that because I don't identify as a man, but that type of work since 2000, so 25 years I've been doing that, and I absolutely love it. And that's like coming up, like we were working on. I was working with Frank today on a name for the show, and so coming up with names for products and services and companies, and the branding behind it, the imagery, the colors, all of that stuff. Absolutely love doing that. And I'm also a public speaker, and I speak on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a really hot topic nowadays. My
Nobody's talking about it. Don't worry.
right,
No,
nobody.
no, no, nobody's thinking about it.
And my focus is primarily the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, building strong allies with organizations, helping them to understand queer people in their organization, and trying to get them to understand what belonging actually means. We talk about inclusion a lot, and I like to say like you can include anybody you want, but how do you make them feel like they're supposed to be there? How do you make them feel like they belong there? So I do that, and then I live in a house with my husband and all of my pets, which are upstairs right now. My husband has turned off all of the lights so everyone is quiet because I have a lot of parrots, birds,
I
and
did the
my
same thing with my
dogs.
kids. I turned off all the lights. Everybody has their sound machines on. Everybody's been fed, so we should be good.
I gave them all peanuts and turned the lights out, so hopefully that will work.
That's awesome.
And I spent a
Um,
lot of time on the TikTok, as you know.
yeah, it's hard when you start making stuff and you find an audience because you feel like simultaneously that you owe people your time, but at the same time it does also feel good to like spread a message and have people agree with you and uh, so I personally, as much as I enjoy it, I do think to myself in my day to day life, I have to find ways to cut back when it's not necessary.
For
So that's
sure.
always been a struggle for me as a creator.
For sure. And I find too, like that was one of my New Year's resolutions is to stop being so reactionary with my TikToks, because I would just like, I'm so fast, Frank. I don't know if you know this, but like I will get a comment and I will have a video done within a minute because I'm just like, let's do this. And I put the comment up there and I'm like, here it is, everyone, and post. I'm like, but what did I not get to? Who did I not respond to because I was doing that instant, like we got to get done right away. So that's part of my resolution this year, and it's not going easy, let me tell you, because I just want to respond.
Yeah. I think it's tough because like there's so much things that we can talk to, but it's hard to really narrow down our attention and focus and figure out like what we should be talking about. But one of the things that I
Sure.
kind of wanted to ask you about, because you had mentioned this earlier in your introduction, so you don't identify as a man. Would it be safe to assume that you identify as non-binary?
Yep. Non-binary,
Okay,
queer gender,
queer
either
gender.
or.
Okay, and so like I think for there might be some people who are watching this. So the majority of my audience on TikTok tends to actually be women from like the GTA who are between the ages of like 35 to 45. And as much
Oh,
as
that's
the
my
millennial
audience.
generation,
I love those people.
exactly right. But as much as the millennial generation loves to be progressive, I still think, especially for some people, and even some people who are older, watch my stuff. So for those people who might not be fully in tune to what your gender identity is, could you give a brief explanation of that?
Oh, for sure. It's interesting because I didn't really understand who I was until I would say maybe 2016. And I was like, wait a minute, other people are talking about this because nobody ever talked about that one. Like I was born in 1981. So things were a lot different growing up than they are now. And there was a lot of language that wasn't there and a lot of, people talking that representation, there was no representation in the trans community. So yeah, first of all, non-binary falls under the trans umbrella. So there is cis and trans, cisgender and transgender. And under that transgender, so for cisgender is your sex that you were given at birth, that the doctor picked you up and was like, this aligns with how
That
you
is what is
feel
in
about
between the
yourself.
legs. This is the
What's
sex.
this?
There we go.
Aligns with how you feel about yourself. Whereas trans, a lot of people think trans stands for transition, and actually is like transistor radio or transatlantic. It just means on the other side of. So it means that the way you feel about yourself and how you were identified at birth don't match. So mine don't match. My gender and my sex don't match. So I would fall under that trans umbrella. And under that, you can have trans men, trans women, agender, gender queer, non-binary. There's lots of different ways that you can identify. So I personally, I say non-binary because a lot of people understand non-binary, but I would say if I was talking to someone that was more familiar with it, I would say gender queer because I feel like not only is my gender on a spectrum, um, I feel like it's a journey of discovering things, and I'm not there yet. And that's why I love the word queer because queer can really mean whatever you want it to mean. And for me, queer is a journey. So non-binary, I don't feel like a man or a woman. I would say I feel more feminine than masculine. So sometimes I would say I am trans femme, which means that you're under that trans umbrella, but you fall more on the feminine side. But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so I do have a few friends who are trans and specifically genderqueer and or gender fluid. Sorry. So I do have some firsthand experience like working with friends as they kind of like evolve through their journey. And it's interesting because I think that like as you mentioned, like you didn't know until about 2016 when this became more of like a talking point. And I think that is something that if we're trying to have a conversation here to try to bring people into the conversation, I'm sorry if I use language that might not be as accommodating. So, like the goal here is I really want to try to bring people into this conversation. So I'm going to try to meet people where they are and try to bring them up to date in terms of terminology. But I think that there's a lot of people who around 2015 2016, it was right around the time that I was finishing up university and I graduated. A lot of people were like, oh well, why are there all these trans people now, without the acknowledgement and understanding that trans people have always existed and will
Always.
always exist because it's a natural part of biology.
Exactly. Like we've always been here. The idea that people want to erase us, you could erase every single one of us, and tomorrow there would be another one. So it wasn't until the terminology, and this is one of the reasons that I actually fell in love with TikTok, is because I saw people like me talking about my a similar experience, and I went, "Whoa, I feel that too, and
And
I'm
it
going
almost
through
yeah.
that."
It almost goes beyond a shared community in so much that it's like a sense of like discovery. And even if it's whether it's like a political identity or a sexual identity or a gender identity, I think that one of the great things about social media platforms like TikTok is that it has allowed so many of us to connect with so many people who are similar to us, who experience the same things, feel the same things, and we maybe never could figure out what that was. And it really
Exactly.
gave us the opportunity to do that.
Exactly. And like I said, I grew up and there was nobody on television that was talking about it, or like in the media talking about it, or who identified or anything. So part of my, I think, I got onto TikTok for, like probably the same reason everybody else did. It was the pandemic and it was like, what do I do now? And I've always loved video content. Like I was posting on Facebook before, like you were supposed to post video on, like it
Way
used to
back
take
when,
me
yeah.
way back. Like it would take 2 hours, Frank, for me to upload a video. I'm not kidding.
I remember I used to upload to YouTube back in the day. So like the channel that I'm going to be posting this on is a channel that I had when I was in high school and in university. So I remember the pains of an upload getting canceled halfway through, and it's like I
Exactly.
waited all night for this to go through.
So yeah, I got on because I have always loved video content, and as soon as the pandemic hit, my friends were like, "Oh, you have to go to TikTok. Like you're perfect for TikTok. Go." And I was like, "I don't know. Like I don't want to watch people dancing all the time." And so I went on, and I was doing just regular stuff. I was, here's my dog, here's me doing a dance, and then I got a comment, and I went, "Oh, I can respond to this comment."
Ooh,
Like this
I
is
can
so.
either be nice to this person or I can just
Yeah, right? You can like, and what I love about it, because it's different than all of the other platforms in the fact that you can take control of the conversation that way. So in Facebook or any of them, the conversation just builds down and down and gets buried and buried and buried, where I can take your comment and go, here, we're starting over here now with me. And I am now in control of this conversation because this
this
is
is a
where the
thing that we have
conversation,
to address. Let's
we're
talk about it.
addressing this and it's not getting lost down there. And the first time I did that, I was like, ooh, I like that. Like, not power, but like maybe a sense of like, I was taking some of my power back. Like, you're going to
Yeah,
call me
I think
this?
it's less about the power that you're exerting on the person who's leaving the comment, and it's more about the power that you're taking back. Because if they left a
That's
comment
it.
that was hurtful to you, you're saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I'm going to give you an opportunity to listen to me now, and everybody else is going to hear
Exactly.
my issue with this, and we're going to have a conversation."
That you hit the nail on the head. Because in the past, if you're marginalized, queer, any sort of marginalized person, all of those comments, most of the time, not all the time, sometimes they happen in public, but a lot of times they happen behind closed doors or in the locker room, where you feel helpless and you can't fight back. And now I can just take that and go, no, we are going to address what you just called me. And I try to do it. A lot of people are like, you're too nice to these people. And I always say, I'm not talking to this person. I'm talking to everybody out there, for multiple reasons. I'm giving you information. I'm saying, like, look at what people are doing. Like, this is not, because people are like, oh, homophobia is over. Like, get over it. I'm like, no, it's not. It's right here. Look at it. It's right
Yeah,
here.
it's still pretty public.
It's, yeah, right. Or I like I said, without having any representation, I want other people who don't feel comfortable to be themselves yet, and are valuing their safety over their being able to be open. I want them to see someone who is like them, standing up for themselves. Like I want, that's what I want. I want them to know, like, I'm not only going to show you how I can do it, I want you to know I'm going to do it for you too. Like, I'm here for you. Like, this, we're going to fight this together. And it's just been such a powerful, I just
Yeah.
love it.
No, no, and like that's the thing. Like it's impressive because you've built up an audience of over 300-ish thousand, right?
Yes.
And so, what did the Chris Paul Rainbow's identity appear prior to you joining TikTok, or was that an evolution of your TikTok journey?
That actually was I started off with my real name, and everyone was, my last name, it's a Portuguese, I'm not going to say it, but like it's a Portuguese name and everyone pronounces it wrong, and the way they pronounce it is very funny, but it's kind of like, also it's insult, like I don't take it, it's insulting funny the way that they pronounce it, because that's the way it's pronounced. My family came over and they changed it at the border. They're like, we don't understand what this says, so we're just going to change it to this, and now it's whatever. So everyone who was talking about me was saying that my name wrong, and I was like, oh. And I thought, okay, can I change it to? And I started out with Chris Paul Sparkles, and I didn't really like it. Sounded like almost like I don't know, like a stripper name, and I
Yeah,
wasn't comfortable.
Sparkles doesn't give me the vibes that like when I hear Chris Paul Rainbows, there's something about it that is like really evocative of like the imagery just works.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so I changed it to Chris Paul Rainbows. I've always loved rainbows, even not part of the queer community. Like I grew up with Rainbow Bright and all of those, He-Man and all of that. Like the 80s was just full of rainbows. I don't know if everyone knows that, but like the 80s was Rainbow City. I love rainbows. I love how everyone is rainbow coming together, the community. Like it's just I love rainbows. So that's
Whenever
what.
you see a rainbow in public, you have this fascination where it's like even if you're driving your car, you're like I gotta look
I
at
know,
it.
right? There's a rainbow.
It's always so exciting.
I know.
So the identity that you crafted for yourself online, I think it's been really valuable. A lot of people have learned a lot from you, and I think a lot of people have felt like a sense of shared community
Thank you.
because of the work that you've done. But when you personally think back, you mentioned on your journey you didn't know, you didn't have words to put to your identity earlier on. Do you feel freer now that you have these the ability to like put these labels on it? Like, do you feel more have you always felt confident in yourself, or has the ability now to put like a specific label on it really opened you up to like a new way of living?
Um. Oh, that's a really good question. Perfectly frank. Um. You're gonna change your name on TikTok to Perfectly Frank. Um. I've always been a very confident person, and I think that's because my parents were very great parents to me. Even though like there was homophobia and Catholicism and all this stuff, it doesn't mean that they didn't love me, and they were really very supportive. And I had a really great group of friends. But I think the more um you learn about yourself, like you're the most important person to you on the planet. Like you are the thing that is experiencing this world. It's like knowing nothing about your car. It's like you should know a few things about your car if you're going to be driving it down the road. And I like to know things about myself. I like to know who I am and what I believe in. The more I learn, and I'm completely open to those things evolving. It's almost exciting when when an evolution happens of how I feel. Like I even think I'm married to a man, a gay cis man, but that doesn't mean that I'm not on the spectrum sexually, or my gender is stuck in one place. I want to evolve. I want to keep learning about myself, and the more I learn about myself and how I fit into this world and with other people, the more confident I become. Also age. Like I'm 40, I'm going to be 44. Like the older I get, I'm telling you Frank, the older you get, the more you're just like I'm not putting up with this any. I don't it's I'm tired.
I definitely hit a point, I would say, post after I graduated from my second degree, when I started realizing like there's a lot of people who don't like what I have to say. And this is like before I started doing social media. And for the longest time, I always thought like people don't like what I have to say because I am challenging. I typically tended to challenge the power structures and people who were in positions of authority, even if they were my age. And
Mm-hmm.
what I discovered is that it's not inherently that I was challenging the authority. It's that in one-to-one conversations in person, I had a history of being very abrasive. And what I think TikTok allowed me to do was, because I was seeing myself on video so often, I realized like, yeah, like what I didn't realize that I was being off-putting in some scenarios. And that is why it was really difficult for me to convince people of the things that I was trying to say to them. And so
Yes.
being like, even if I'd have a TikTok that would like blow up and get like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of views, I'd go back and I'd watch it and I'd be like, I wish I didn't yell in the way that I did. I wish that I framed it a little bit better. I wanted to keep the energy up, but
Yeah.
I definitely, as I got older and as I was able to self-reflect, I think I was able to learn. And when you were talking about how like homophobia still exists, people are still out there expunging hate, like or exposing hate. I don't know if you feel the same way, but it feels like to me a lot of and let's be real, it's a lot of the men who are online, uh, sending out this kind of hate. It's like it's either they haven't discovered empathy, or they haven't discovered self-love, or they just need to like be exposed to like a different like worldview outside of what they've been experiencing since they were 7 years old.
Yeah.
It feels like there's no evolution there.
Yeah. So to your first point, I totally know what you're saying about watching yourself back, and I think I've really evolved on TikTok in how I respond. I watch some of the older ones, and I think, wow, I shouldn't have said it that way, or like, why was I being mean at the end? Like, there was no reason for me to be mean about it, even though, and people will say like, well, they were being homophobic to you. Like, you have every right to be mean, but that's just not. I just don't feel good about that. So like I have rules now. Like I go out of my way not to be mean, spirited. I would never comment on someone's looks or body, or, fight back that way. I don't use homophobia against people. Like a lot of people will like, well, misgender or transphobia, like, well, you can misgender them because they misgendered you. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Why? I want to show what you should be doing, not like I'm going to get back to you, or like, people will say like, oh, they need to come out of the closet. I'm like, well, what if they do need to come out of the closet? Like, I'm not
All
going
you're
to.
doing is shoving them back in there. Yeah, like
Yeah,
it's
I'm not going to say that
yeah.
about them. I don't use words like, I never comment on anyone's intelligence. Like, people will say that these people are dumb or stupid. I don't like those words. I think they're very ableist. I have my brother has Down syndrome, and I've seen those words used against him many, many times, and I don't like those words. I don't really comment on people's I think that like if it is like coming after you in an ableist, or in a way that is just uh um like classist, like, I don't know someone's education level, I don't know where they grew up, I don't know if English is their first language, so why am I making fun of them for those things? Like, there's no
The
reason to
English is
do
the
that.
first language one. That one really, because there would be a lot of times where if somebody said something that was totally wrong, I'd be like, "Well, that's wrong, and you didn't spell this right." And the person would be like, "Hey, I just moved here, and like I'm still learning English," and it'd be like, "Ah,
Yeah,
you know what, my bad." Like
yeah,
you do
especially when
learn, and
es-
yeah.
especially when they've said something that is so bad or wrong that you don't need to comment on the words being spelled. It's like, let's just focus on the fact that you're being transphobic. That's fine. I can do that. So I've evolved that way. I'm not perfect. I'll never say I'm perfect. I'm constantly learning, and I've made some mistakes, and I've been called out, and I've made apology videos, and I'm so glad that that happened, because I've learned from all of those things.
I think one of the other things that I wanted to ask you about is so you said that you do like you do speaking engagements and
Mhm.
you have an ad agency. Like where did that all come from? Like so was the ad agency something that you did before, or is all of this an evolution of the post TikTok Chris Paul Rainbows?
So I went to school for graphic design and illustration. Um, College, and then I got a job in an agency. I've only ever worked in agencies. I'm kind of sad that I never worked in like a corporate office, because I've always worked in small agencies, and I've liked that experience because everybody talks about it, which I hear isn't good, but like, but anyway, yeah, I worked in a couple small agencies, and then I found that I'm very bad at working for people. Like, I don't, people are like, you need to do this, and I'm like, who are you again? They're like, I'm your boss. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to do that. So I opened my own agency, and that's how it started, and I grew and grew, and then I sold that agency, and I wanted to kind of be a little bit smaller and boutique and just myself, and so I opened up the Unicorn Rebellion in 2017, I think it was. And I was speaking, I was kind of like one of the, I don't want to say I'm one of the first people, but like
Well, I was
back
one
in
of
the
the
day.
first on the scene.
But like, I was very into social media as soon as, like, I had my MySpace page was gussied up, and
Oh, you
as
so you're talking like you were on it like day one.
oh yeah, oh my gosh, yeah. And then Facebook came around, and I got that, and then I started using it for business almost immediately, and like business page, and doing ads, and creating a brand. And like, the brand I created in Hamilton, Ontario was like one like for my business was one of the most well-known brands in the city, because of social media. And I started, and people were coming to me going, "How do I use social media for business? What do I do?" So I started teaching
That's
that.
awesome. You're like you're a true digital native. Like you really grew up in the era where you had the opportunity to like take advantage of everything that was in front of you, and you not only learned about it, but you kept up with it. That's
Oh, I
pretty damn
did.
impressive, all things considered.
I did keep up with it. It was very difficult. And like I was one of the like on Twitter at one point. I didn't even live in Toronto, but I had the. You probably don't remember this, but there was this thing called your clout score. So it was like
Oh no,
basically.
I remember code scores back in the day.
So I had a clout score of 75, which was the highest in the GTA, on
Damn,
Twitter, like from my Twitter account. I wasn't even in the GTA, like I was in Hamilton, but they included it, and I had the highest clout score. Like
that's awesome.
I was just addicted. Like I was part of like Tweet Stock, and I held the like one of the first social media. I called it Snowball social media, like events. And yeah, I had like Ford sponsored me, and oh my gosh, that like they just lent me a car to use for the weekend. It was crazy. It was oh my god, I have a story. We're not going to talk about this,
And
but
this is
like
like circa 2011. Like when is this around?
yeah, 2011. Like yeah, I would say like 20. Well, I started my business in 2007, and then maybe like yeah, I would say maybe 2010, 2011. You're right. Um
That's pretty awesome. Yeah.
yeah, I had like Magnum ice cream. I don't know. Do you know Magnum ice cream?
Oh yeah, they're good.
Like they sent me on a full day excursion with helicopter rides, limo, um winery, like all the ice cream I can. It was crazy. It was
You've done
crazy.
some really cool things. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, like that. Let's just. And then after it was funny because they were like, "Oh, we're going to have an event to launch this new brand in Canada. Ivanka, or no, it was which is the daughter, Ivanka Trump is going to be there." And I was like, and this is like
Yeah.
back before every like Donald Trump was not running for president or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to go to that. Like, ew. So I didn't go to that one. But yeah, so
Well, I guess.
I started
Oh, sorry.
teaching social media, and speaking about social media. Like I've spoke at like Marketing Magazine conference. I've spoken all around North America for how to use social media, and I was teaching social media at the city hall, and my husband was teaching social media at McMaster University. And then when I started, so I had that's where my speaking career kind of started. And then when I started my new company, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like I'm not doing social media training and speaking. Like I can't keep up with it, and also I don't like doing it anymore. Like I just don't want to do it. So that's where I kind of somebody was asked me, "Oh, here's something that happened that kind of changed the trajectory." Um, do you remember when that guy in the States was like, "I'm not baking a gay cake for any for"?
Yeah. Yes.
So I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like are you kidding me? So I proposed to my husband, and I was like, I want the gayest cake possible as part. Do you know this story already?
No, no, I'm just thinking of like the gayest cake possible. Just sounds amazing. I love it.
Oh yeah, so I called the bakery, and I was like, I want the gayest cake that's ever happened. Like, and they're like, sure, whatever, we'll make it for you. So I got the gayest cake to celebrate our wedding proposal, and I took a picture of it, and I was like, in Canada, when you ask for a gay cake, you get a gay cake, and it went viral. Like I had friends in like the Caribbean calling me saying like, you're on the front page of the paper here. Like it was huge. Um so and like it was just kind of I started a podcast called Let Them Eat Gake with my husband. Like this was in 2000. Yeah. But that kind of like that's where it started too, where someone was like, will you come and speak and tell your Gake story? And I said sure. So that's where my career of speaking about queer topics and things like that kind of I took my training of speaking for social media and just converted to I can speak about anything. So yeah,
It's always
sorry about
interesting to
that.
see.
Long.
No, no, that's awesome because it's interesting when you see how like the one thing that you did, like not you as an individual, I'm saying you like for anybody really, you do this one thing and then like all of a sudden it snowballs into all these different other opportunities and events. And I was talking to my students today, they were asking me about like just different things that I gotten involved with and different things that I've done. And so I was like, oh yeah, and I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this. And then one of the students was like, sir, aren't you like in your 30s? How have you lived so many lives? And I'm like, I don't know. I've lived one life. I just like say yes to every opportunity and I do a bunch of crazy stuff. And it's just, you get the opportunity to experience a lot of the world. And I don't know if it's because people like me and you put ourselves out there and we're the only one there, so we get it, or if it's because there is something special about how we communicate. I don't like to like put that on me and be like, oh yes, I am the world's best communicator, because there's so many things that I wish I could be better at. Like the first time I was using my teleprompter, I felt so inauthentic and so awful about it. Watching that back, it made me feel really cringe. But I do think that there's something to be said about like just saying yes to things, putting yourself in those situations. It's like the whole creating your own luck thing, right? Like
I
because
think
it
it's a
sounds like you've
mix.
done a lot of that.
I don't think people like to acknowledge, a lot of people don't like to acknowledge their privilege. But I think if you do, you'll find that it's a mix. It's a mix of privilege, and it's a mix of putting yourself out there. It's a mix of your education. It's a mix of all of these things
We have the
together.
opportunity to put ourselves out there, right? Like,
Exactly, exactly. But it's funny that you said that, because I was redoing my website and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't remember all the things I did. So I asked Chat GPT. I said, go on the internet and here's my name. Can you list things that I've done in the past? And it came back and I was like, I forgot I did all these things. Perfect. Thanks, Chat GPT.
that's 'cause it's funny because sometimes somebody will like send me a comment or a DM and they'll be like, "Oh, do you remember this video that you did about like this topic? Like it really impacted me and it changed the way that I think about the world." And I'm like, I made that video in 2021 while I was raising a newborn, working from home. We're in the middle of like our third lockdown. I don't remember anything, but I'm glad that I had an impact on your life.
Oh.
And so one thing I wanted to ask you about, because when we talk about impacts and changes in people's lives, like you mentioned that you're really fortunate that your parents were accepting in terms of like who you were, and that you had a good group of friends. Um, did you like early on, and because obviously children don't have like the language, especially when we were kids, to say, "Oh, I'm cis," "Oh, I'm trans." Like that just really wasn't in like the zeitgeist. But like, was there a moment where like the light switch flipped in your head at an early age, and you're like, "Ah, I am not the same as many of my peers."
I don't think it's the light switch moment for me. I'm always speaking for myself. I'm never speaking
Yes,
for
for sure.
others. I don't speak for the entire queer community. But for me, it wasn't necessarily this like light switch moment. It was kind of like, I remember always feeling different. I didn't know what it was. But like the world will make you feel that way if you are different. Like it doesn't matter if you don't have the words. The world makes you feel like, I remember liking girl things. There are no girl things, but like, my mom having to hide my little ponies from my dad and all of this stuff. And then obviously when you start to mature and you start having crushes and stuff, it kind of clicks in like, oh, that's what that is. That's that difference, for sexuality, obviously not for gender. But and then then you've also got things in your life like the Catholic Church, going to church every Sunday, and then telling you from the pulpit, you're sitting there and just thinking, please don't say anything, and they're just like, this is wrong, this is bad, and that's so heavy. Like I think that the Catholic Church owes me money for therapy. Like I'm sorry,
Emotional
like,
reparations.
right? Like you got
Well,
enough money,
yeah.
give me some money.
And
And
I
then
also grew up Catholic, right? And I remember I remember being a kid and gay marriage was legalized, and thinking to myself whenever it happened, like, who cares, whatever, like this just makes sense. Like I remember being very nonchalant about it when it happened, but then as I aged and I continued in Catholic school and I continued going to church, there was like the latent homophobia that kind of gets imbued in you. And I don't think it's that I don't really think I was ever outwardly homophobic, but I definitely had um times where I really struggled to be accepting and an ally. There's this friend of mine who I made in first year of university, and he nicknamed himself Gadrian, and he was like, "My goal is to find every single person who like thinks they're homophobic, but they're not actually homophobic because they just haven't met a gay person, and I'm going to be their gay best friend, and I'm going to make the world less homophobic. And I'm going to tell you right now, Adrian was a huge impact on me in terms of
Oh,
like just like realizing like, oh yeah, I just don't know enough gay people, or the gay people that I did know were so far in the closet that I couldn't get to know them on that level. I knew who they were, and they were very evidently gay, but like because we couldn't be open and honest with each other, I never like came to that understanding. And so like
yeah.
there is a value in the work that people like you do, because like you're exposing people, even if people are like not homophobic or don't have an issue with gay people, it transforms them into allies, and there's a value there, because then they take that allyship back home to them. And if somebody makes a comment at a Christmas dinner, you say like, hey, like that's not cool. And I think that there's a really important ripple effect in society. And I think we're lucky that we live in Canada, and that we're one of the first countries in the world to legalize gay marriage, and we've always been very progressive on that front. And so like I don't know, like do you feel like you've made an impact in that regard?
Um, I hope so. I hope so. That's my goal. Um, I met Jared, my husband, I think 3 years after it was legal to get married here in Canada. So like I was around like as an adult through that kind of time. And yeah, I don't think, do I think things are getting better? I don't know. I don't know if things are getting better. I can put a video out there, like honestly, like if I wear lipstick, I'll get called out. If I'm talking about queer things, I'll definitely get called, like somebody will say something, even if I'm wearing lipstick. And sometimes I'm not doing anything. Like I'm not wearing
And it's
lipstick. I'm literally
oh,
wearing like a hoodie. I'm outside and I'm in the garden, cutting the grass, and people will be like saying homophobic things. So it really doesn't, you're shoving it down our throats. And I'm like, I'm just living my life. I actually did a whole series, I think it was 2 years ago, where it was the radical trans agenda, because people kept on saying that. And I was like, what is my radical trans agenda? I'm literally just eating ice cream. Like, so
the
I
gay
just made like,
agenda: eat my ice cream, live my
right?
own life, be happy.
Do anything. I like so and but my goal, so there are a couple things. I recently came up with my new kind of purpose. I always try to think about like what is my purpose in doing what I'm doing, and that can evolve and change, and I'm always relooking at it. But like number one is to be the representation I didn't have as a child, to people, and number two is to build stronger allies and accomplices, and give people the tools and the words. Like you're saying, there's people who are on the fence, and I don't necessarily think that they're I think homophobia is homophobia no matter what. But I think with the right education and tools and words and understanding, um, they will just be like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. Totally. And they will have those conversations. And I know those conversations are happening at the dinner table, because they've told me, like, I talked to my family about, like, remember that whole thing where they were saying that teachers were letting kids use cat litter boxes?
It's like
Like,
I hate that, because it comes back every like 6 months, and then I just have to send the person like the fact check to be like, no, this was like a rumor that was on Facebook from like Louisiana. Why would it be happening in Peel region?
I'm sorry, like, I don't think this is offensive or anything like that, but homophobes and transphobes are so unoriginal and so predictable. I can tell you to the day, Frank, the day before, like how many days before Pride, where I will start getting, well, how come you get a whole month? Well, how come you're not celebrating veterans? Well, how come? And I'm like, you're so like, we have to go through this every year. Like, come on. So
They run
giving
out of
those, I
material, so it gets really stale.
it is. I actually this year, the past last year actually, I created a Pride guide, which like every day I would post about, like, here's the question that people will get, like, why are veterans not celebrated for a whole month? And I go, here's the information. Now you as straight cis people go and do that work, because I'm tired. And like, they loved it. They're like, thank you for these words, and it was the basic, like, well, they do get more than a month depending on like what you're celebrating in terms of the military. There are queer people in the military, like so many things. So I give them all the information and go and do the work because I'm tired of answering the questions.
That does remind me of like, yeah, like and I'm guilty of this too, right? There's a lot of like, especially cis white men who like have this like realization, oh, the world is bad and like we should do something about it. Like, did you know that like queer people face homophobia? And it's like, yeah, no, duh. This is the world. Thank you for making it all about you and your learning experience.
Exactly. And we all have, it doesn't matter who you are, you've got something you can do better. You can always do better. Like I grew up, not specifically my parents, but just in like the town and the culture and the church that I was in, it was very anti-indigenous. Like there were people in my family who said very anti-indigenous things. And it's not that I believed them, it's that it was just, it was just going into my brain and I wasn't thinking about it until I went, wait a minute, why, when someone says that, why do I automatically think this about Indigenous people? Where did that come from? And how
It
can I
involves a lot of
fix
like
that?
unlearning. Yeah.
So much unlearning to do, like that, like all of us have to do unlearning because we have all been fed this stuff. And that's a lot, that's the part a lot of people, because unlearning can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's uncomfortable, it's getting less uncomfortable for me. Like I used to be very uncomfortable, now I'm like, oh, that's all I take in now. Like I listen to books on like racism, like misogyny. Like I'm listening to women talk about misogyny because I want to learn. I'm actually actively like, I want to know more. But people are so uncomfortable about that because it might change something and they might have to like not say a joke anymore. They might have to, not say a certain thing or do a certain thing. And it's just like, well, if you're going to be a better person to other humans, why don't you try?
Yeah, I've never, I, I think, not that I am in any, like, I'm very much like a generally stereotypical, like, cis straight guy. But I think a lot of people, like, different times in my life thought that I was gay because of, like, my mannerisms. And it's like, no, I'm not gay. I'm just Italian. I talk with my hands and I'm very animated. Uh, and you'd be surprised at how many people, like, and I'm sure, like, you get it, you're Portuguese, you're European, you get it. But, like, there's just, like, certain like mannerisms that like when you haven't been exposed to European culture, it's like, oh, are they gay? It's like, no, they're just Italian, man. Like,
They're just
uh,
Italian.
yeah, but like it's, I guess I never felt like insecure in that regard. So I always knew that I wasn't like, oh, the big tough alpha male kind of guy, but like, I always was very confident in who I was, and so I think that I'm lucky that that never got to me. Um, but there is something that I wanted to touch on. But before I pivot to like this other type of conversation, I wanted to like ask you this question, not because it matters, but because I think we needed a little bit something lighthearted after what we just talked
Sure,
about. What's your
sure.
favorite color of lipstick
Oh my
on
gosh.
you? On you?
Purple. I love purple. I recently, you're not going to know anything about this, Frank, perfectly frank. I got my
Go for it.
colors done. Do you know what that means?
Like figuring out if you're like winter or fall and all that. Okay. I try to keep up. So I do my best to keep up with things in like fashion and style. Simply because I teach and I teach teenage girls, I teach teenage boys, and so like I if they're talking about something, I want to be able to like keep up with the conversation, even if I
Yeah.
like this is my style. I wear a leather jacket all the time and a blank shirt or like a branded T-shirt or whatever with my jeans. Like that's the only thing I ever wear. I don't have style, but I have to at least know what's going on, right?
Yeah, so that's what it is, and I recently had them done, and this is one of the colors that they chose. But I love purple's been my favorite color since like the beginning of time. So anything purple, I absolutely love. Thanks for, what's your favorite color?
You know what? In terms of like looking at the color and like seeing the color and using the color, I really love like a deep blood red. Like I really
Oh,
do like dark reds. But on me personally, because of my skin tone, like I have this really weird olive skin tone where like in a lot of videos and photos I look jaundiced, and I cannot tell you how many times I've had nurses or like grandmothers DM me being like, Frank, I'm not saying this as in a rude way, but I think you should go get your bilirubin levels checked by a doctor. And it's like, I'm not jaundice, I'm just European. But because of that, like a lot of colors don't look good on me. Like I don't look good in a lot of like brighter yellows and greens. So brighter colors tend to just not look good on my skin, except I look really good in like a coral. So like
Oh,
not like a vibrant pink, but a little bit of a muted pink is like as bright as I
yeah,
can go before it starts to clash. Like I really have
right.
taken to that. I have a lot of like this, a lot of shirts that are this color, and I just think that I look good in it.
You do. You look
So
good in that color.
yeah. But part of the reason that I wanted to talk about like your favorite color and like kind of like feeling confident in like the colors that we wear and stuff like that is because like as I was mentioning, I've always been confident in my sexuality. Like I've always known like that I'm a straight guy, but there's always been people who have like kind of questioned it because I do have some more feminine tendencies. And one thing that I really started taking to in high school, and I did this once in high school, and then I did it pretty much every year in university for a different event or some reason. I've never like fully dressed in drag, but I have worn dresses quite a few times, and they're always for different reasons. So when I was in grade 12, I hosted the fashion show, and there was a skit that I did with my co-host where like it was like the prom section of the fashion show, and she shows up in a red dress, and I show up in a red dress and heels, and then we look at each other, and I go, "Well, one of us has to change." And like so many people were like, "Wow, you're so brave for doing that." And like they're like, "Did you want to tell us something?" I'm like, "I'm not gay. I'm just comfortable wearing a dress. Why can't a guy wear a dress?" And then there were other times where like I'd be doing these different things in university, and like we were doing a skit or a challenge or something, and it's like, oh well, somebody has to wear a dress and run down the hall in heels, and I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, I've done this before, not a big deal. And so in that regard, I think that if somebody ever did approach me and say, hey, like we need somebody to like fill in for this drag show, would you do it? I'd say, other than tucking, let's do it. Like glam me up. I think I would be confident, and I have the drama capabilities to do that. But like, what I'm not sure if you have you ever done drag yourself or no?
That's so funny that you asked that. I was during the pandemic. I Somebody asked me. I was the very. I feel like I'm patting myself on the back too much, but the city of Hamilton in 2000, when the pandemic started, they said, well, maybe it was before that actually. They said, would you be willing to do drag queen story time? And I went, yeah, I would love to. Like there was no question. I didn't have a character or anything. I developed a character. People loved it, and I actually there's a whole section of my TikTok where I am Ladybird Fancy Pants reading.
Okay, so that was you. Yes. Okay, I remember that name,
It
Ladybird Fancy
was
Pants, and
that was
I
me.
didn't want to. Yeah, that was I because I think I remember seeing a few of those videos of yours, and I was like, that's really cool. Like that's because kids love costumes. Kids love anything that involves like fantasy and dressing up and being silly
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. And I specifically did it my way. So I've never done drag. Not that I love drag. I love all kinds of drag performance. I've never done drag at a bar. I've never done anything like, I've never done lip sync anything. I've only
I'd be
ever
so bad
done
at lip syncing.
I've only ever done drag queen story time, and I developed my character Ladybird Fancy Pants kind of after like an aunt that you would love to go and visit on the weekend. I didn't wear any padding. I didn't wear a chest. I didn't wear high heels. I didn't do anything other than just put on some clothes, pants, because it's Ladybird Fancy Pants, some makeup and a wig. And people were saying that I was sexualizing, myself to read to children. I was like, what about this is sexual though? Is it dressing up like a woman? And this is the problem: is that um, people don't hate gay people and trans people, they hate women. Everything stems back to misogyny. If you look at anything, why are you wearing that lipstick? Is why do you want to look like a woman? Why do you throw like a girl? All of these things. The thing of like people going to you, Frank, like why would you wear a dress? That's gross. Well, women are
Why
gross.
do you have to be confident to wear a dress? Like why does it have to be stigmatizing in any capacity?
Exactly. So it all stems from misogyny. It's like how could a man, even want to be a woman? Like that's just like ugh. Um, so I did it for a while, and I would comment all that stuff. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I think I educated. And then I realized that first of all, I have a lot of sensory issues with autism that like, certain things I can't wear. That wig is so hot. And also I realized I want to show up as myself. I don't want to show up as a character. I don't want to show up as Ladybird Fancy Pants. So I still do I still, if somebody was like, hey, we're doing this charity event, will you come read books? I bring my animals, I read books. And most of the time, unless it's a pride event, I'm not reading anything queer related. It's like books like I Like Myself, which is just about I like myself, and it's just seeing someone like me up there doing that. That's all I want. And that whole, I think it's still ongoing, but seemed to have been, you know, it seems to have evolved over time into like this, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm underplaying the hatred that is out there for trans people, because it has always existed. I know that. But I feel like we have morphed into full on hatred for trans people. And
Yeah.
it kind of evolved from, like not pronouns and women in sports and drag queens. And now it's just like, we want to erase them completely. It is man and woman. Like, it's literally a document from the president of the United States saying you don't exist anymore. Like, that's where we've come. But so that the drag thing for me was a huge part of my evolution of who I was. And people on TikTok, I did lives on TikTok, people loved it. It was so much fun. So yeah, I have done drag.
No, no, I think like, yeah, you're right. The misogyny thing you were talking about, like it, it really all boils down to that so much. And I try to work on that with my students, like especially with like a lot of the grade 12 boys that I see when they're going to go off to university or college, and when I can see that they are on like the border of like about to say something misogynistic or and then maybe they don't even get it, and I'll
Yeah.
I'll, I'll try to remind them like, so where is this coming from? Why do you feel the way that you're feeling? And like, do you realize that you're not going to have the intended outcome? So like, there was a student that I had a couple years back, and he was really into Andrew Tate, and I don't think that he was a bad person. I think it was just that he did not. I mean, I don't think he had enough female role models in his life, because he would always talk about his dad and his uncle and his brother, but there was never conversations about his mom or aunts or anything like that. And so, um, I one day I kind of like in the middle of class I was just like dude, like you realize that Andrew Tate is not going to tell you like the secrets to getting women. Like when you talk like this, you're doing the opposite effect. Women are not attracted to this behavior. They're not attracted to this type of language. And if your intent is to, whether it's get a girlfriend or otherwise, be successful with women, you're doing yourself a disservice by
Yeah.
like ingraining yourself in this culture and this identity. And I do think when I look at some of those students, I do think a lot of it is like that toxic masculinity, the misogyny, and I do my best to break down those barriers, and we even do it in our own household. So like when my kid was born, one of the first books that I bought was the Gay BCs, simply because it was like I wanted to have something like that in our house to make sure that my kid was exposed to understanding that there's different type of people out there.
Yeah.
And I had family members come and be like, well, why does your kid need to know about that? What do you mean? It needs to know that like there are different people in the world who exist? Like
Yeah.
it's the idea that they think they're protecting children,
Uh,
but children don't need protecting. Like we live in a world. Like I'll tell you another thing that really kind of like irked me was like there's a new Spider-Man show, and I
okay.
really like it. My kid freaking loves Spider-Man, so I'm gonna watch it with her. And so we're watching it, and I remember reading an article where the head actor was like, "Well, I'm just glad that the show wasn't woke."
I saw that.
Um, but in the first episode, somebody gets racially profiled for being black. Like the cops are like eyeing him down, and people don't want to sit next to him on the subway. And my kid is like, "Why don't they like him?" And I had to like pause the show and be like, "Some people are mean to other people because of the way they look, and that's not okay."
Yeah.
And she's like,
Exactly.
"Okay." Like that's like she's 3. All she has to know
Yeah.
is it's not okay to not like somebody because they look different or act different, and
Yeah.
we should
Exactly.
be supportive.
You're not no, like, I don't understand why people think that like this indoctrinating them kids to think a certain way. It's literally like showing them things like Spider-Man, or like I used to read a book called Stella Brings the Family, and it was literally that she had two dads, and it was Mother's Day at school, and she asked the teacher if she could bring both of her dads, and the teacher said yes. Like, that's the whole book. People were had a full-on meltdown about this book, and I was like,
How
but
dare you
they're like,
devalue women like that?
it's gay. And I'm like, no, it's just her two dads. And then when you read it to the kids, you look to the kids to direct the conversation. Why does Stella have two dads? Oh, because they're in love. And like, hey, I have nieces, and like my brother has explained to things to them. I have explained to things to them, like with the easiest, simplest answer of like, Jared calls me mommy sometimes because that's what the dogs know me as. And you know what my nieces they go, okay, like that's it. They're not
Yeah,
like what?
it doesn't phase them because they don't have like the cultural understanding of this fictional reality that we've made where it's not okay. Like they
Yeah.
don't know any better, so like whatever, who cares? Just like let people be people.
Exactly. And like parents aren't
Yeah.
willing to have these conversations with their kids. So I don't understand what, like, blaming teachers for having these conversations, sex ed and stuff. I'm like, I was like in grade 3 in like literally 19, well, what would grade 3 be? Like 1988. We had sex ed, and like we talked about, you know anatomy, how a baby was born. Like, do you think any of that has changed? No, that's what they're teaching them. They're teaching them the proper words for different body parts, which is not only um truth, but also a safety thing for kids to be able to be like, this is my body parts, and they're not called hoo-hoos. And like, that's all. It's
One of my favorite things about when people were fighting about Ford when he came into office and he's like, I'm going to fix the sex ed curriculum because Wynn's sex ed curriculum is bad. And like what most people didn't realize is that the new sex ed curriculum brought in by the Wynne government was very, very similar to the sex ed curriculum that had always existed in Ontario. It
yeah.
moved around some things to be more age appropriate, but otherwise, what they brought in was in almost all grade levels the idea of consent. And so
Yes,
Doug Ford basically undid consent
that's
in our
safety.
schools. And then afterwards they brought back the exact same curriculum with the consent included, and they were like, "We just introduced a new comprehensive sex ed curriculum, and it's going to be great for kids." You introduced Wynn's plan, and you just put a PC label on it. Like
Yeah.
let's. I don't. You know what?
Like,
This isn't about politics. This isn't about politics. We're here to talk about fun things. I got a
no,
fun
no,
thing
no,
for
no,
you.
no. Wait, I wanted to say though, like we
Sorry,
talk
sorry.
about
Yeah, go for it. Go.
these weird things that people talk about, like the sandbox. I remember when this Ontario sex ed thing came out. I remember hearing something about like they're teaching kids how to trade their underwear in kindergarten, and I was like, what? Like that doesn't sound right.
People just make up whatever they want
Frank,
to make up. Like people just
I
make up the
don't have
craziest thing.
children. I read the thing 3 times. It's free. It's downloaded. You can download it on the internet. I downloaded it and I was like, I read it thoroughly to see like what's going on here. There was nothing crazy in this document.
People want to be upset. People want to find a way to be upset.
I find that I find that a lot of bigoted people use kids as an
A shield.
excuse
Yeah.
and as a shield in so many different. It's always kids. Like we have to protect the children, so it's a reason to hate trans people. Like it's always been that way, right? It's like sundown towns. We don't want people of color sleeping over in this town because the children and the women have to be safe. They've always used children as their scapegoats to hate, and it's no different now.
If you want your child to be safe, you need to teach them that in the real world, it's messy and it's complicated, and that the world is also beautiful and different. And like that's how you protect your kid, because you don't want your kid to like become an adult and then not know that there are different things out there. Not
Yeah,
simply because they're like it's not about whether or not they're going to spread hate. It's more so about you don't want this person being a full grown adult and having to learn about basic things that a lot of us learned about when we were between the ages of like 3 and 10. You know what I mean?
right.
Like this is just basic. Hey, this is the world, and we live in it. But I did want to touch upon a couple other things. Um, one thing really quickly that you mentioned. You mentioned that you're on the spectrum.
Yes.
So I've never been formally diagnosed, but a lot of my ADHD symptoms that I have been diagnosed with are borderline also on the autism spectrum. So I do share a lot of the um, behaviors and experiences of people who are autistic. And one thing you mentioned about like materials is like if I touch a microfiber cloth, I can't. I just the dryness of the feeling of those cloths really gets to me. So I was just wondering if is there anything else that like you mentioned that you struggle with? Is there anything else that you find that you had to grow and learn to deal with because of whether autism or any other learning disability you might have had?
So first of all, I was diagnosed with ADHD first, and that was very hard to do actually to get diagnosed with that. Like I had to like it was like telling my because the doctors don't want to give out the meds. They don't like those meds are like she told me. She goes, "You get these meds. If you lose these meds, you're not getting more meds. You better hide them in your house. People will break into your house." I was like, "What?" So
We
I
had to
got
go to we had
diagnosed.
to go to the Children's Hospital in Toronto to get a proper diagnosis for me because it was so hard in the 90s to get diagnosed with ADHD. So like my
Yeah,
parents went through a whole ordeal to make
yeah.
sure that I was properly diagnosed for school.
Yeah, and I wanted to get diagnosed because I wanted specific ADHD medication. And the first time I took it, I went, "Whoa, where did all the noise go?" So I know it works. And so I haven't been specifically medically diagnosed with autism, um, but just through my own research. And like I don't care if anyone's like you have to be, and like great, then I have to be medically whatever you want to think. I don't care. I'm just living my life over here, and I'm trying to understand myself better. And I have autism, ADHD, because and
They
I
do
also
blend a
started.
lot. There's so many things that overlap. Like I
For
think that
sure.
if I had been diagnosed in the modern day, I think I might have gotten an autism diagnosis from school, simply because, especially who I was as a kid and before I learned whether you call it masking or whether you learn it's called whether you learn whether you call it coping or what have you. A lot of the things that I had as a kid and learned to deal with, I think, are things that kids who now get diagnosed with autism also had to deal with.
For sure, for sure. And like the way we were taught that autism was, we weren't taught that it was a spectrum. We were taught that this is what autism looks like, and I was like, well, I don't. That's not me. So, and then I again like I started watching TikToks, and I would show them to my friends. I go, does this sound like? And they're like, holy cow, that's you. And my husband, I'm like, and like it not only helps me understand myself, it helps the people like my husband understanding where I'm coming from. But it's everything from like touch and feel to like I can tell um the lighting in the room can be bothersome to me. The temperature, if it is goes above 72, I know the second I go, what? It's gross in here. Textures of my food, sounds, repetitive sounds will eat at my soul. So many things, and
Yeah.
yeah. So
No, and
yeah,
when I was a kid, my mom used to have to cut all the tags off of my clothes, because if the tag rubbed my neck in the wrong way, I would keep scratching at it, keep scratching at it, keep scratching at it. And like I have today a few times been scratching at my neck because I just realized that a shirt that I wore yesterday, I kept wondering like, why is this shirt so uncomfortable? And I looked at it
yeah.
and I'm like, oh my God, there are like three tags and one of them is like super coarse. So I went in with like my scissors and I cut it out very carefully. And then like I'm still like getting recovering from like the like that sensory thing because like it really got to me. So when I was on ADHD medications as a kid, even with the medication, that type of sensory stuff would really bug me. And there was one time
Yeah.
where my hair could not touch my forehead, and that was a huge tick for me on when I was on a certain medication. And it got so bad that one day when I was at school, I kept brushing my hair away, but I was using my nails to keep moving, and I did it so many times, like hundreds of times over the course of a day, that I actually ended up making myself bleed a little bit.
Oh no.
And so like yeah, like I get the whole like sensory thing and having to like overcome that kind of stuff, and it's just like I don't know. I'm glad that I'm in a place now where I can learn to kind of cope with a lot of that stuff. But it is just something that I'm glad, like same thing with whether it's talking about language when it comes to gender and sexuality. Like I'm glad that we live in an era where kids have more ways to learn and understand and express themselves so that we can
Yes.
better help them grow, right? So that they're not dealing with it in their 30s, they're dealing with it when they're kids.
Exactly. I think like we're giving them tools to like understand themselves and be the people that they're supposed to be. Like I think it's fantastic.
The last thing I wanted to touch on before we depart, you do a lot of gardening too, right?
I do a lot of gardening. Yeah.
What's your okay? So like I'm Italian and my garden is just peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers. That's it. Every time I try to grow something else, it doesn't work. And I love making my hot pepper oil. I'm not good at making the paste. I still got to work on that. My buddy was telling me, oh, you need the torqueto. You need to have like the specific tool so you can drain all the liquids out and that. And I'm like, man, I'm not gonna buy all this stuff just so I can make chili paste. And then every single time I like eat some, I'm like, if I just buy a torqueto, I could probably do this myself. But what is your favorite thing? Like for me, it's like tomatoes. I love tending to tomatoes. There's just something about it. You got to put the work in. And you got to keep them clean, and it's just like you get a bushel of tomatoes, you eat the fresh ones, and it's so nice. So what
Yeah.
for you is your favorite thing to garden? Whether it's a vegetable or whether it's flowers, like what's that one thing that you like? I love doing this.
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. So the only food that I actually grow is lettuce. I grow hundreds and hundreds of heads of lettuce every year because I have five bunnies, and lettuce is really expensive. But that's not my favorite thing to grow. I do love growing, like I have my flowers and stuff like that. But this one year I grew a pumpkin, and I put it in the compost, but I forgot that to take the seeds out. You're supposed to take the seeds out. So the next year, when I went to compost my yard,
Oh
I put
no.
seeds throughout the entire yard, and I had 300 pumpkin plants growing in my yard. And my husband was like, "Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do?" And I was like, "Nothing. We're going to leave it be. Like this is going to be the funnest." So
You
I
had a
had
pumpkin patch.
I had pumpkins growing. Like I don't know if you know, but like just one pumpkin seed, like the plant is ginormous. So I had
It's like
300
eight. It
of them.
doesn't it make like eight, 7 or 8 pumpkins?
Oh yeah. If you don't cut them, like depending on how big you want them. Like if you want one big one, then you would cut all of the little
Yeah,
ones off.
because they're like cucumbers. They're the same family, so they can just keep
Oh yeah.
growing and growing. Yeah, yeah.
So they were growing up my trees and on my roof, and so I actually built. I had 167 pumpkins that year, and I donated them to a daycare, which was so fun. I went there and I read The Great Pumpkin to them, and I donated all the pumpkins for them. And I said they could pick whatever they want. And I said if they have the most sincere pumpkin patch, the Great Pumpkin is going to visit them this Halloween and give them a present. And they were like, "Ooh, wow!" And then so I have a thing called the Unicorn Fund, which supports 2S LGBTQIA plus kids in Hamilton, and every year like we've raised over like $80,000 for it, and every year I get to donate about $2,000 from it. So I bought $2,000 worth of kids books for all of these kids, and I delivered them on Halloween, which they absolutely loved. But anyway, I love pumpkins so much that I built a pumpkin house, and it's basically just it's like a house with like this big trellis that the pumpkins grow up and create like this roof every year, and I just sit under there and I enjoy my pumpkins. I love pumpkins.
I like how you started talking about how much you loved pumpkins, and then you took like a detour to basically be like, and I'm also like one of the best people who's ever lived, and I do all these amazing things. Not to humble brag, like you're legitimately, genuinely such like an impressive person, like in terms of like you do a lot of cool things, and you help people out, and I admire that. Like I wish I
Thank
did more
you.
for my local community. I know that that's something that I have to work on, but like
Well,
that's really
listen,
impressive.
the first question everyone asks is, "What did you do with all these pumpkins?" So I thought I'd just skip the question and go right into it. And the second thing is, my brain never stops. Like I'm a creative person by nature and by business and everything. So I see opportunities in everything there is, and I see opportunities in giving back. People think that giving back means that you have to give money. But you don't. You can do your time, your talents, or your treasures when you give back, and giving back to your community is, I just think, so important. Your local community is so important. Voting everyone in your local community is very important, but giving back, because if you love your community, your community is going to love you back. Like and that's where you live. That's where you spend all your time. So why wouldn't you want it to love you back?
Honestly, like I don't know about you, I think we've had a very open and honest conversation. If
I
I'm being
think
perfectly
so.
frank. And I'm really glad that we had this chance to chat. And I don't know how many people are going to end up watching this and listening to this, especially because it's the first one. But like a lot, they better. But I genuinely feel like better having talked to you simply because like
Oh,
you are an inspiring person, and I think the like
thank
I'm glad
you.
that I got to know you better through this because like you only know what you see, right? And when you really start to dive into like what a person does and like what they care about and what they value and the things that they do, I think it's really important to like to really like find things about people that you admire and try to emulate that in yourself, right? Like it's like you don't want to just look at one person and be like, I want to be like them, but it's like finding all these different people in the world who are doing all these really cool things, and you look at them and you're like, wow, if I could pluck out the one thing from each of those people that I think that I can do, I can also maybe try to be a better person and do some really cool things.
Well, I think you're that person too. And I was so just pleased to meet you and find out that you're the same person that you are online, because so many times that's not the case. And anyone out there watching, if we're talking about TikTok and building an audience and all of that, like be like, I hate this word because it's so
I
overused,
hate
but like
you're gonna say authentic, right?
be your authentic self. I hate that
I
word,
hate
but like
saying authentic.
just be who you are,
Yeah.
because I'll tell you, it's so much easier to be that person than to be somebody else. And then when someone meets you in person, you don't have to play pretend. I meet people all of the time. They go, "It's Chris Paul Rainbows," and I'm not different than I am on. I look different because there's no filter in real life, but like, but
I
like,
think the moment when we met, the moment that I knew that you were the person that you were online is when you laughed the first time. And it was the second you walked into the room, like you immediately said, "Oh my God," and then you started laughing. And it's like, yeah, that indistinguishable.
I laugh all day long. Everything is so funny.
I'm really glad that we had this the chance to
Me
have
too,
this
Frank.
conversation. And yeah, if you guys want to hear more conversations with people that I have in the future, you can follow me on all the different podcast apps. This is also going to be on YouTube in video form. I also now do long form videos with the help of an editor, and
On YouTube.
hopefully on YouTube, yeah, and hopefully I can start putting out more of that kind of stuff. And I'm really glad that you were my first guest, and you were able to help me out with the naming of this too. So to be perfectly frank, I think this was a fabulous conversation.
I'm honored. And now I get to work on your cover art. I'm going to do a little illustration of Perfectly Frank. So I better go
Thank
and
you
do
very much.
that. Thanks, Frank. Thanks, everybody.
No problem. Have a good one.